I want you to welcome Dr. Ehsan Kattoula, who is the Assistant Superintendent of Accountability Division, Cobb County School District.
Hello.
Thank you. And also our host for today. Thank you very much.
Thanks for everybody being here.
Yeah, that's great. And my good friend, Dr. Kyia, who's the Executive Director of Information Innovation from DeKalb County School District. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
And my new friend, Dr. Tim Smith, who's the Chief Academic Officer, Division of Teaching and Learning, Muscogee County School District. Yay, let's give everybody a round of applause. Woo! Okay, well, I'm going to be mostly off camera this time because I don't have somebody with me today. So I'll just ask questions as we go, right? So we talked a lot earlier today about AI versus humans, considering that there's a lot of scientists who think that there will be an AI singularity eventually. So we have a job to increase human intelligence and make it, very serious, like as an undertaking, like rally behind it. And I don't feel like everyone feels that yet. So I want you guys to comment on what do you think about that as a challenge? And also, what do you think we need to be doing? Okay, who wants to go first? I'm looking at your faces and thinking, Tim, I'm going to call on you. What do you think?
Well, I appreciate being on a panel, not knowing what I was going to have to answer today, so that's great.
Isn't that super fun? Woo!
It's great.
It's like a game show. How awesome is that? Yeah.
I think we have an ethical imperative to move this direction. We've been talking all day about how education is not changed. And it has to change. The 50% number you gave us about public schooling in 2030 is terrifying. So how do we avoid that from becoming an actuality? I think is critical for us to focus on. Lost the question. Would you ask it again?
Yeah, the thing about AI versus humanity and the need to increase human intelligence, make it so that our kids can compete in a world that we can't predict. But AI is supposed to be taking a lot of jobs in the near future. I mean, the World Organization has been talking about that for 5 years. So it's a worry. What are your thoughts?
So we're talking a lot more about workforce development. We've focused for years on grad rate, and our grad rates look amazing. And yet we're still graduating kids who are not ready for the workforce. So that's, when I started this job in July, and that was one of my marching orders from the superintendent was more sustained student achievement and creating workforce ready students. But that means we can't do things the way we've been doing them.
Yeah.
I don't have the answers. I just know this is what we got to do. This is the direction we have to head.
Yeah, well, I like that you're feeling it at least. Okay, Kyia?
Good afternoon. Thank you for the question. I believe that as educators, we have a responsibility to prepare the students for a future, a position that we're not familiar with what it's going to look like. But AI is the starting point for that information. I, as a student, had to go to the public library to do research. Our children want information in real time. And so AI doesn't answer the question, but it gives them the baseline information for us to teach them how to become critical thinkers and to utilize that resource to make decisions that are based on the information that they have access to. My husband and I share a 26-year-old daughter, and he would give her an answer like, no, you can't. And she would sit there puzzled as to, wondering why not. Because children today want to know the why and the how and the information behind that. And so that's the information that AI will give them in real time when we as educators teach them how to use the tool resourcefully.
Well, I'm going to give you two perspectives. I'm going to give you my professional perspective and my personal perspective.
Yeah.
The professional is that AI is a choice. I mean, the whole thing about today was flex. How do we allow students to become flexible in their learning? That's what AI is. Since 1967, when the Air Force started introducing AI as the first component, it was used to assess pilots. That's where it started. And so from that point on, all we needed to do was give choices. Which pilot is better than the other pilot? That's the choice. And as your conversation was happening today, how do we provide choices for the students? as educators, that is our job, is to let them, empower them to give that choice. From the personal standpoint, as a former EL student or ESOL student, if I had AI when I was in high school in the mid-'80s, I think I would have been given a choice on how to learn. And that's what I was giving you. How should a student learn? It's not about expedience, it's not about speed, it's about giving choice for a student.
I like it. Okay, so, we're going into a new year, 2025, it's only February, everything's changing around us. We've got a culture shift, we've got expectations on schools that are bigger than ever. We've got people saying the Department of Education, the federal level, is not gonna be there anymore. What are you proud of right now? What are you thinking, okay, we're doing good at this, I'm gonna hold steady on that, and then we'll go into like what else you wanna improve. But let's just talk about what you're proud of. Ehsan, you go first this time.
Well, I want to tell you that what I'm proud of is that our superintendent has a very good relationship with our board, because I think it starts at that level. Everything else becomes noise. There's a federal noise, state noise, and then the district noise. I think if you collaborate very well with your board, I think it puts in policies that allow for students to be successful. He had a vision for us is to be able to create a very good working environment for all students to go to one access, and we call that Cobb Teaching and Learning System called CTLS. There, it flourished during COVID. For us, everybody else was running the Google Classroom, it wasn't working. We had CTLS. All of our teachers were in there doing their lessons and the ability. That's what I'm proud of. We have a leader for our district that allows for us to give us that flexibility and work with various companies to be able to entice our product. So that's what I'm proud of.
Good.
Good afternoon again. In DeKalb County, I'm very proud of the work that we're doing in terms of with our superintendent when it comes to our graduates being employed, enlisted, enrolled, or certified to go out into the workforce and make choices for themselves. In our district, I'm extremely proud of the work that we're doing in our instructional technology department. When I think about our tech cafes and the ways in which we are empowering parents to be engaged with their students and to know how to support their children at home. Because we all know that technology moves pretty fast, and as parents, we're trying to keep up. But our instructional technology under the leadership of Ms. Terry Webb does an amazing job making sure that parents are informed and connected. Another thing that I'm excited about is the work that we're doing with AI. She has begun to build out a course where we're talking about the guidelines that need to be there and introduce AI in such a way that students begin to understand the right way of how to approach AI, and teachers are beginning to have the conversations of what could this look like in my classroom.
I'm proud to get to work with a team that's not afraid of change, and that's what we need for this time in our history. Also proud we have a group of principals that collectively is probably the most talented group we've had, at least in a long time. So I feel like the sky's the limit. We just have to figure out the right moves.
Good, good. So strategy time, so strategy. Okay, good. Well, let's talk about the challenges, because you've heard this from me before, Ehsan. These guys heard it today as the presentation about like where the market's going as all the trends converge, and a lot of change, right? When you step back and look from your lens in your district, what are your challenges, right? So Ehsan, you want to go first on that one?
I think there's multiple challenges, but I'm going to address the one that hits all of our districts together, and that's called transiency rate. The challenge of identifying students that are transient to be able to use AI as a predictable entity. How do you use AI as a predictable entity when you've got 25% transient? Some of our district here, Cobb County School District's average on transiency rate hovers around 22%. I know my colleagues at other districts goes 18% all the way to about 60% transient. So how do we use the current information we have at our disposal, like AI, to use as predictability to be able to work with students that are transient? I don't blame students for being transient. It's not their fault. It's the ability for the parents to be able to house their children the best they can if they're in the military or serve in our country. Those all things come into play. But using AI to resolve that challenge, we could use the AI data to be able to predict what is the best methodology to instruct the students wherever the instruction is occurring.
I think that before I get into the challenge, I must talk about another celebration. And that celebration is around what we're doing to recoup those students that have made choices to leave schools before they've graduated. And so we're being very creative with coming up with ways to bring students back in, to catch up, and to finish their high school diploma or secure a GED in non traditional ways. The challenge that I see with that is the fact that we're struggling with having classroom teachers. And I know that we're all thinking about alternative ways to fill those classrooms and to fill that void, but there is no replacement for the human factor. And so education is in such a way that we don't have individuals who have the gifts, the passion, and the talents to go in and make a difference in the lives of a child, to reach them the ways that we were approached when we were in schools. And so that's the challenge that I would like to lift today.
For me, probably my soapbox lately has been rethinking accountability and the challenges we have with working within a system that's grad rates and Georgia milestones results. And you think we don't have there's not another industry out there that takes a snapshot in time on one day, doesn't get the results for 4 or 5 months, and then makes decisions with that information on people that weren't even involved in that assessment. It's insanity. So how do we pull ourselves out from under that bureaucratic system and hold ourselves accountable to do the right work, to do the right things for our kids?
Yeah, there's a lot of it's built for yesteryearness. I mean, in an age when I can get a box of ice cream on my front door in under an hour, that's just ridiculous. Yeah, I know Ehsan's just dying to answer that one. Go ahead and again.
Well, I do agree with my colleagues up here that we do have challenges, be it with the graduation rate or keeping students at school. How do you make school more important to the student? Let's just take it back. How can a student see that education is important for them? It's that sensory component, and I loved what you said earlier, that schooling has stayed the same thing. Well, students have stayed the same thing. 18-year-olds, hormonal-wise, as humans, we've always stayed the same thing. When I was in elementary school, middle school, and 70s and the 80s, that hasn't changed. But I think the learning part has changed tremendously. The information moves much, much faster, and the adaptability part. Yet, the creativity part. Adaptability for us as humans, we do a very good job. Creativity takes back seat, and that's when it becomes a hampering component for our education system.
I totally agree with that. I had a conversation this morning. We were talking about forcing a square peg in a round box. And so often we're trying to force students into conformity. We're trying to force students into doing things the way that we've done them. And our kids are rebelling, and we see this day in and day out in our schools. And so until we in education are willing to make that shift and change and meet the students where they are, we're going to continue to miss the mark.
Final comments? Well, I'm going to ask the audience to ask you questions now, right? So who wants to ask these guys questions about the future and what are they doing and all that stuff? Do you guys have any questions? What do you think? There's one back here. Okay.
So you guys all talked about what your challenges are now. What do you see down the road as being the biggest challenges that we're going to have?
I would continue to say teacher shortage. I would continue to say making sure that you have a highly qualified teacher in that classroom, in every classroom across the district and across the state. I also think about where we are in this global climate, when we think about deportation and immigration and how that will directly affect our classrooms. When we think about our STEM classrooms, when we think about our special education classrooms, when you go back and you look at the demographics of who's teaching in those classrooms, we're doing something that's going to be very counterproductive to our boys and girls. We're also making schools a place that's not necessarily seen as a safe haven. So often we've talked about, building a classroom where children come in, they feel safe, they're willing to let their guards down, and yet we're putting them in an environment where it's very challenging for them to want to leave home and for them to come into classroom and feel secure around strangers that they don't know what the intentions are.
I'm going to take this perspective. You need 23 credits to graduate. Why do you need 4 years to be in school? That's the challenge. Time. Give students time. Give them the ability, the flexibility of using AI to prepare themselves. Yes, we do need some students to stay all 4 years. We need students to be able to get a career pathway. 23 credits for math, for science, for English, 3 social studies, and an elective pathway. 23 credits. Give them the time back for them to decide what's the movability for them, what is the next step for them. Get them graduated in 3 years.
I think big challenge is how do we create a curriculum that, to the point of kids wanting to go to school, where parents feel like the kids graduated with skills they need for life. And we can't do that without community conversation. So getting a community to where they're heavily engaged in the planning process and the accountability process, and just having an ongoing dialogue where there's that trust back and forth both directions.
Yes, I get to be next. I don't know if this is working. Oh, it is working. I'm curious about it. It's kind of connected between well, really all of your questions. But when you talk about rethinking the structure, why does the student have to be there 4 years when they've completed the competencies, or not even necessarily the credits? Maybe they've shown the competencies and they're able to demonstrate readiness. But at the same time, there's these shortfalls in career readiness, and yet out there in the real world, there's a shortage of workers, and it seems like there's a solution in the mix of all of those problems of, do we really need 18-year-old students who are in their second semester in the building, or is it time for them to move on and to be able to learn workforce readiness skills directly within the workforce? So how do you make those public partnerships with corporations that would probably be happy to provide that workforce training and have ready skilled workers? But at the end of the day, it's policy. It's policy. It's regulations, laws, mandates. So what are you guys doing to challenge the norms? 'Cause I think we all know that there's a solution. It's just there's a lot of barriers, bureaucratic barriers to making it possible. So I'm just curious if anyone's actively working to break that down.
I'm just getting started in the role, but my belief is if a community can come together and determine these are the expectations and the outcomes we want, and in a partnership, a school district and the community provided that, then the bureaucracy that we live under becomes inconsequential. If the community doesn't care what our test scores are, if they don't care what our grad rate is, but they care about the quality of the graduate coming out, I guess I'm kind of living in a what if space. What if we can get to that point and not worry about, letters from the state about schools getting on a state identified list or whatever.
Right.
I'm excited to be here with a great team, and we're here with we call him the police, but it's our security officer. And one of the things that he's doing that I think is really, really amazing is establishing partnerships with high schools so that students can begin to get the exposure when it talks about internet cybersecurity, internet safety. That's creating a pathway and a job outlook for students, something that they traditionally may not have been exposed to. We also have our CTAE programs, and we also have our technology schools that provide students with real world experiences. So I'd like to see that pathway explored even more. It'd be wonderful to have more artificial intelligence in the building where students can do simulations and work with students in other countries, in other parts of the world, actually see operations being done and so forth. So there's room for this to happen, but it takes a group of individuals like those that are in the room that are moderate thinkers and thinking from the lens of what could be possible.
I like what my colleagues up here have said. My perspective on it is, what does your community want? We are educating our students to bring our students back into our community. That's our goal. That's how we expand our communities. So the necessity is to work with specific entity, the DOE, like the Georgia bill, that all students should start identifying what a career is early on. They moved that, it used to be ninth grade, now they moved it all the way to late elementary school. So that component of our perspective is we're going to educate our students to bring them back to our community. Hopefully they'll go to either workforce or go to a university and bring back that knowledge to expand our community. Because we don't want to diminish our community. We don't want to minimize our community. There's too many communities that are faltering because their own children that went to those school systems are not bringing their children and raising their family. So our goal is, yes, come back to our community, and yes, raise your family back in Cobb County School District.
I guess I have the next question. So, my school district is a strategic waiver school system, meaning that, as you all know, that we can use waivers to bypass some of the bureaucracy and do the things that we need to do or we believe that we need to do with some accountability on that. I'm wondering if any of you are maybe a Swiss school district or a charter school district, and how, when you consider the possibilities of AI, the need to restructure schools, reimagine, reinvent schools, how are you using those? What do your meetings look like? What are your conversations? And how are you moving the right bureaucracy out of the way so you can achieve what you need to achieve?
Cobb County School District is a strategic waiver, formerly known as IE squared. One of the biggest things that we've done is really go and empower the principals. Having the principals in their own CCC. We have 17 waivers going from how we hire our employees, how we have seat time. We've used those to our advantages, but our biggest one is to be able to put our schools and their leadership team in their CCCs. The other part that I've used is to be able to put AI to use is what I call like schools. I use about 38 data points, put them together, and identify schools that can come together and say, based on these 38 data points, you can come together and say, what do we do within your 4 or 5 schools that we can empower you with the strategic waiver? What is it about your 5 schools based on these 38 data points to be able to have that conversation? So to me, the strategic waiver is empowering collectiveness of those CCCs, Cobb collaboratives, teams, and identifying specific areas that they need to talk about. So it's just not high achieving, low achieving. It could be various points, being an EL population, economically disadvantaged, achievement scores, SAT scores, ACT scores, COGAT, and I can list all 38 if you want. But once you place those group of leaders together, now they've got purposeful conversation. And that can fall under strategic waiver.
DeKalb County is also a strategic waiver school as well, and so we are empowering the principals to make the decisions that need to happen for their schools. But the department that I'm most proud of is our equity and inclusion department, where we're looking at the data and making sure that we're not missing any subgroups. For so often we were underserving or not necessarily capturing all of our gifted students, and so we've looked at different ways in which we can qualify students for gifted. And so there are different qualification points. We realize that we have some students that are just not ready the first go round. So those are the students we consider to be up at bat. And so when you get those students that are there and the teachers understand, hey, this is something that we may need to cultivate or what have you, empowering the parents to understand what they have at their arm's reach as well, to be able to make those informed decisions. In addition to that, we also want to make sure that we're serving our special education students and our ELL students, as well as our economically disadvantaged, and that we are not leaving any shortfalls.
We're strategic waiver as well. I guess to be totally candid, I was not involved in that last waiver, and my perception is most of the decisions were fiscally driven, and we probably need to revisit that.
Yeah, share something.
Yeah, sure. Guy, thank you for mentioning the gifted and talented. It's huge for me. Totally, yeah.
You know, in our efforts to raise the ceiling and the floor at the same time, we're Swiss, of course, as well. We understand that we have, most of us who have any kind of issue in the school district, those issues go back decades. To to the assistant superintendent's point, children are the same. As you said, it's the schooling that is not changing and keeping up with the times. So in our efforts, we're trying to use those strategic waivers to create the new school, the school of tomorrow. We want to be more intentional about what we waive and why we waive it, so that we can set up systems that are new and relevant to our students and to the time that we're in. We're always careful we always want to give the principals responsibilities that apply to them. We don't want to get in their way for their work, but we also want to take responsibility for our work. Somebody said it earlier, you can have a school system or you can have a system of independent schools. When you're in a certain place, our belief is that you have to have more structure among schools. And then when you get to that baseline point that you want to reach, then we can start to do a gradual release. But we're trying to create those things. And another thing that we want to do, and maybe you're doing it as well, we always submit legislative priorities to our state and federal representatives, so that we can try to involve some change at the highest levels. One of the biggest ones that we would love to see, especially with the teacher situation and the shortages, is a difference in funding. How do you fund? If schools don't have all the teachers that they need, can that funding be more centered around the number of students that you have? It makes more sense to me, because regardless of how many teachers you have, you've got to educate a certain number of students. And that's why we want to get heavily into using technology to maximize and spread around those great teachers and have apprentice teachers who also help them. And now teaching becomes a team sport, not just individual. So I want to make that point.
Very good.
Didn't he just make the magic point?
He did.
Because this is what I want to hear leaders saying, right? Like, if you can't get the teachers anywhere, why are you sitting on the headcount money? Invest it. Invest in technology. I'm waiting for all of you guys as leaders to lead from becoming technology, from a distribution through tech to the human, and then flanking that with your best human teachers, because you don't have very many, right? You gotta leverage them. Where's the leverage? If they're stuck in a classroom all day. Okay, don't make me go on. Okay, you guys go. Final answer.
You got the mic.
Final answer.
Yeah.
Do you like what he said?
Absolutely. Very valid points. I'm still stuck on it. We got to look at our strategic waiver and see if we need to make some adjustments there.
Okay.
I agree with Dr. Hendricks as well.
Yeah.
I agree with Dr. Hendricks. I think the quality-based education, or the QBE, needs to be modified based on the necessity of the student. So I think that is one of our priorities. It's a priority for many of us who are in the metro area.
Yeah.
But the other part that I like the most is that it's variation that exists between having 20 schools, 40 schools, 80 schools, and 120 schools or 150 schools. And that variation, as much as you try to use the strategic waiver system to your advantage, it always comes back. How do you empower the leaders in the building to make sure the teachers are successful? Encouraging the teachers, developing a curriculum is always a great thing. But the last part that we need to be able to include is that teacher voice. It doesn't matter. If you're coming in contact with the students, the voice has to be stronger on behalf of those students. Otherwise, we as leaders will never know what it is.
All right. Thank you. This was awesome, right? Okay. So let's all give them a round of applause.
Thank you.